What up, guys? Let's talk about it. Path of Exile 2 versus Diablo 4. Which game is the better game? And kind of want to answer the question that I've been constantly seeing, and you guys want to know which game is going to be worth your time. And essentially, the big question is Path of Exile 2 going to be the Diablo 4 killer? So in short, I want to say absolutely not. They're kind of fighting over two different demographics in terms of their player base. And I want to say that it's totally fine to play both games, which is something I plan to do. I plan to play both of the games, but I've been consistently seeing in the comments people arguing about like this is the Diablo killer consistently. And I want to say that there is a side of the casual versus, I would say, more hardcore is kind of like the term in terms of like the action RPG genre. It is still a pretty hard game to play at the end of the day, right? And the way I see it is when I hand someone a controller, you know, if I was, you know, playing couch co-op, let's say with Diablo, or let's say Path of Exile if they have couch co-op. Okay, let's just use it for an example. Can I hand a buddy a, you know, controller and just say, here, you know, let's play together? You can't really do that in both of the games realistically. Diablo, yes, it's easier. However, at the end of the day, these games require you to look up a build. You have to build your character. You have to get items. You have to read these things. Action RPGs in general are not going to be a super casual friendly experience, but there is at some point where someone looks at something and goes, heck no, I can't do that. A lot of time when people see the POE tree, when I always show people like this, you know, skill tree and how intricate the game is, sometimes people freak out and they just get overwhelmed, right? And at the end of the day, it's going to be fighting over two demographics. And what's cool with this is the more competition any gamer has, that's going to be good in terms of being able to have, you know, competition. In fact, they actually mentioned something with Diablo 4 in one of their presentations, which I thought was pretty funny, and we'll go over that. But I think that they are fighting over two different audiences. One is for someone that is a hardcore action RPG player that likes to tinker around, and that's, I think, what the core identity of an action RPG was many years ago in terms of its design with D&D and all these different iterations of, you know, your character's build progression. However, Diablo in general, specifically going from Diablo 3 and to 4, you have this kind of template of a character, right? You have your basic skill or your generator in Diablo 3 and 4, and then you have your, you know, your big mana spender. So it kind of separates the skills. You have ultimates. And Path of Exile is kind of different in the sense where like you kind of pick the skill that you want to use and you just kind of spam it, right? Most builds will have one. Path of Exile 2 will be changing things up with its new system where you get to socket gems inside gems for support gems, and you can actually have multiple skills to actually use, which is actually one of the biggest nice changes. But Path of Exile is claiming to have some insane amount of huge improvements to the game, and these are some of the things that they're claiming. 100 distinct environments, 600 monsters, and this is crazy. You know how many bosses Diablo has in terms of like a world boss? We have 3 world bosses. Path of Exile is like, we're gonna have 100 bosses, each with their own unique like style of mechanic, and they look good too. I'm blown away. 1,500 passive skills, 36 ascendancies, and on top of that, 240 active skills. This is just bonkers levels of stuff. 700 equipment types. It's just insane what they're actually offering, right? And at first I was thinking, oh, well, you know, we already have Path of Exile as the base game. Are they just like copy paste and then, you know, they're just saying we have 100 bosses when they just add up all their other bosses, you know? Because I was thinking, well, at the end of the day, you know, for someone that's never played, sure, that's 100 new bosses, but for people that are playing PoE for many years, how many bosses is that actually? I want to go over the beta date here. So this is happening in June 7th for the closed beta. And on top of that, we don't know any information about the open beta, or if they're even going to have one, or the actual release date of the game. A lot of people want to know, like, what's the release date? What's your estimation? Okay, guys, I've been playing games and you know, I've worked with some game companies. My guess, closed beta is June, maybe November, we get November/December, we get some sort of open beta, and then at the earliest, I'm thinking like something like March. Again, I don't have any insider information. This is just my speculation on people want to know, like, when do you think it's going to come out? It's probably not till 2025. That's my guess. All right, but this is what blew me away. So Path of Exile 2, because remember when they said 100 bosses, right? Path of Exile 2 is not an expansion to Path of Exile 1 anymore. And my mind was blown when I saw this. I was like, what? This is crazy. So they're going to be separate standalone games with separate balance patches, separate expansions. And I'm like, okay, so basically we're getting Path of Exile 2 and Path of Exile 1, and we're getting both expansions for both of these at different times. So now we have Diablo 4 to play. We also have, I guess, Diablo 3 if they ever make another season. I don't know if we've even had a season 29 announcement, but nonetheless, there's going to be Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2, and they're going to coexist at the same time, but your microtransactions will be shared between both games. Awesome. But this is mind-blowing because all that stuff with 100 new bosses, well, that's actually 100 bosses because this is a separate game completely, which is crazy. Now, going over the design of this game, they threw some shade. This is what I wanted to talk about here. In terms of its design, because this is important, even though this post kind of blew up because it's basically making fun of Diablo 4, but I don't really think it's necessarily a bad thing because it's just a different playstyle, right? Where Path of Exile has a system where they're like, we could force a player to use multiple skills by putting cooldowns. They want you just to use, you know, a bunch of different skills, and the way they designed it is just big brain, and I'm actually impressed and blown away. So what they did is they put cooldowns, instead of not putting cooldowns on everything, or relying on skills that give you resource so you can use your expensive skill, like your generator or basic skill, to use your, you know, core skill in Diablo. When you're using any of these things, a lot of these things where like basic skills activate and more damage to your next core skill, right? That's just how Diablo is designed, but there's no depth to it. We want it to become natural, and this is something that I personally enjoy, but at the end of the day, Diablo is still giving you a template, so your build isn't really that bad. Again, Diablo 3 and 4 basically do this. Diablo 3 eventually kind of moved away from the system of having like the non-elective mode is what they were calling it, and in Diablo 4, I guess at some point there's probably going to be so much resource, it's going to be playing very similar to Diablo 3, especially if you look at the most recent campfire. The direction this game is going in is very similar to Diablo 3. If you like Diablo 3, then you'll probably enjoy Diablo 4 more as it kind of progresses, but if you're more of a D2 person, I'd say Path of Exile 2 is probably looking more in your direction with weapon swap. So you can obviously put in, you know, your gems inside gems, and this is going to be how you can use multiple skills now, which is massive because previously Path of Exile you had like one damage dealer, then you had a bunch of buffs. Pretty much that was kind of the build. There are some, you know, niche things. However, what was crazy and mind-blowing to me with this weapon swap, okay, I'm just going to mute it and I'm going to try to explain it real quick. So basically you can have a weapon swap, and this weapon swap is really cool because you can have separate skills have you swap the weapon, so you actually can use double weapons. So I can you know, maybe apply a freeze or a chill or some sort of condition on the enemy and use some item that gives me bonus damage or has a higher chance to affect, you know, maybe it does more damage to enemies that are frozen. So there is way more build diversity with this change. It's actually insane. And then they blew my mind even further by saying, well, on the skill tree over here, you can actually put in points to your weapon set 1 and 2, which basically almost makes it so you have skill tree like 1 and 2, but you swap between with weapons. And this is just mind-blowing, and this is the stuff that I want to see in action RPG. This is the innovation that I want to see in the action RPG genre versus Diablo's. Honestly, it's relatively safe at the end of the day. And these are some of the bigger changes, and I'm just going to go ahead and go over the other changes that I want to talk about. So there's a new spirit system. So instead of reserving mana, you just have a separate reservation, which is awesome because that means that, you know, certain builds that would use I think it was like Arcane Cloak or like anything that would like take giant chunks of your mana that would do more damage based on some sort of condition of mana. It becomes infinitely better now. So that's going to be really exciting to see these other builds emerge because the way the mana system works now. And then on top of that, you have this new cast on X condition, so you can get cast when enemy is shocked or something. It's kind of like cast on crit, but you don't even have to manage it. And I think this is awesome. This is really cool. And this is another just awesome system that is, you know, implemented into the game. And I like the idea of having certain things just activate automatically instead of like, you know, cast when damage taken, which I used to run a lot, but now you just used your mana. But now with this whole spirit change, it's going to be amazing. And I'm really excited to see with that. And then on top of that, I now want to briefly talk about Diablo 4 and its future. And the reason why I want to talk about Diablo and its future is because Diablo is also going to get some updates, okay? And I wanted to go over, like, you know, because this game doesn't come out until probably 2025, maybe at its earliest, I want to at least give Diablo a little bit of an edge here, because if we're comparing Diablo 4 to, you know, Path of Exile 2 in its current state, well, 1 doesn't even exist, so it's kind of unfair. So I want to give Diablo some time. I'm looking in terms of like the future of Diablo. So what are we getting in the future of Diablo? So this, just as a heads up, I'm going to mention, take this with a grain of salt, because this was something in the earlier stages of development, so some of these may not actually ever come out. But I want to give Diablo some time here to kind of have some extra content. So what would be coming out in, let's say, the next year or two in Diablo? Well, they mentioned mythic items. This was part of the original game's design. The original game's design was you had normal, magic, rare, legendary, and then you had ancients, and then you had mythic. We still don't even have set items, so more than likely we'll get set items. That's something that most people kind of expect. Are the set items going to be completely changing up builds? I hope so, and they completely, you know, make things where we get to spin around as, like, let's say, a twisting blades rogue and we can shoot blades out. But the identity of the game is relatively the same, right? In terms of like what we're getting in terms of a mythic item. If you guys don't know what a mythic item is, basically just slam 4 aspects onto it. That's pretty cool. That's going to give you a massive amount of, you know, bonuses. And at the end of the day, that's just more numerical changes. The core gameplay and identity is going to be the same. Now, where it kind of shifts up is with runes and rune words. Now, I've been in different like discussions, and I have asked them about rune words, and they didn't say rune words are just removed from the game completely and we're never using them. Basically came down to just time. So my guess is eventually in the first expansion or maybe second expansion, we will get runes and rune words. And this is where Diablo gets complex. This is where it gets to become the action RPG, you know, that you get to tinker around with things. You have these condition runes and these effect runes. So basically, it's kind of like Path of Exile's system where like when this condition is met, this effect is activated. So this really is way cooler than the current system of, well, throw emeralds inside of your, you know, weapons, and then you just throw in rubies or topazes inside of your chest, and that's it. You now have some kind of cool condition where like when you freeze an enemy, you activate the next rune, and then when active, it reduces a random skill cooldown by 15%, or it activates in something. And this is where the build diversity gets good, and I'm more interested in the game. In addition to that, I was thinking about like how long can we play the game, right? And on top of that, also wanted to mention really briefly, I'm just gonna go ahead and just have this playing in the background so you have something visual, while I go ahead and mention the other things that will be coming out in Diablo. So I've already mentioned that there's gonna be set items, rune words, there's probably gonna be new classes, and they've already confirmed expansions. Now, another thing in terms of separating the player base, keep in mind these expansions are going to be paid expansions, and Path of Exile is completely free. So they are definitely fighting over two different demographics. One's more casual, and you have to buy the game, right? And you have to buy the expansion. It's got the battle pass, and there's microtransactions in the game. But Path of Exile is completely free. And this is a pretty big deal just for the games in general, in terms of like how popular a game can be, just because there's always going to be a larger player base generally in a free-to-play based game. And the thing is that most people that will play Diablo 4 can try out Path of Exile, but the people that are playing Path of Exile, well, it costs money, so there is that barrier to entry, right? But on top of that, new classes would be very, very major. But another thing I wanted to take up a small little like brief mention is looking at like the malignant hearts. Like all of these pretty much are mostly damage numerical changes. Like look at all of these malignant hearts. They're just things that are in the game that just modify certain things. Some of them are kind of more interesting, like you're using your HP. This is the kind of stuff that I wanted to see more of in Diablo versus like, oh, you just get more damage in some sort of a condition when the enemy is, you know, affected by something. And this is one area where I feel like Diablo could actually benefit from actually doing a little bit more game-breaking things in the genre and try to show off their talent. And I feel like the Uber Lilith boss fight really shows that they can make these really cool bosses for the game, these good pinnacle bosses. Remember, Path of Exile is going to have 100 bosses. It's going to be very difficult. I don't know, unless they're using AI, okay, because this is very major. To announce 100 bosses and they all have their own unique mechanic, that's very, very impressive. I don't know how big the team is. Maybe they just got every single person that was like, hey, you make a new boss, you make a new boss, everyone making a new boss. And at that point, you know, that's better, because it's better that different people design different bosses, because then, you know, it's kind of getting a different perspective on things like that. And I think Diablo needs to be coming out swinging. What they did most recent on the campfire is like, guys, we're going to be buffing all of these numbers. That's not that exciting. To have a new season come out and, you know, say that, you know, we're going to have to wait for all of these buffs was kind of weird for me. And honestly, I like both the games at the end of the day, so I will be playing both of those. And, you know, obviously, we're going to have seasons come out, and as long as they're not timed at the exact same time, we will definitely be covering both games. We'll be making guides. So in terms of answering the question, you know, am I going to quit Diablo for Path of Exile? Absolutely not. I play both games. Sometimes I'll go back to Diablo 3. People ask me, you know, did you quit Path of Exile? No. How action RPGs work, because I know a lot of times this is like maybe their first one, is you have a season. A lot of times I won't play for the full 3-4 months of a season. I'll grind it really hard for a couple weeks. I'll finish, I'll get max level, or I'll get whatever new boss that comes out. I'll kill him, and that's it. And then I move on to the next video game, and I come back when there's a new season. And that's kind of the life cycle of the action RPG. So both of them, I think, can coexist, and I don't think that one is going to be killing the other, as Path of Exile is more niche in the action RPG department because of how much you have to tinker to actually have fun. Whereas Diablo, you could hop in, play the campaign, and you could be more of a casual player and enjoy it, and then be like, okay, that was fun. I don't need to play any more action RPGs. I'm gonna go hop on Call of Duty or Fortnite, right? Whereas someone that's playing Call of Duty or Fortnite, it's kind of a hard sell for this game, or specifically Path of Exile, because it just has so many little intricate like things in the game. But anyways, that's gonna wrap things up. If you guys know the video, drop a like on it if you're new here, and want to go ahead and also comment what your guys' thoughts on it. Do you guys think Diablo 4 is going to be killed by Path of Exile? Like I mentioned, I don't think so. But subscribe if you guys want to see more of my content, and I'll see you in the next one.